Checkup by BOQ Specialist, a series of podcasts created specifically for current and future doctors, dentists and vets.
No doubt you've all heard of the great Australian dream, the dream of one day owning your very own home. Back in the day, this dream might have looked like a detached house in the suburbs with a large garden featuring a hills hoist and a barbecue. While today's dream might look slightly different, the desire to own a home is just as strong, and with the government offering stimulus grants, coupled with record interest rates at an all-time low, the time to buy your first home never looks so good. But the housing market just seems to be increasing in price every minute. So what is the key to opening the door to your very own home? That's what we'll be discussing today, and are lucky enough to be joined by Ben Thompson, real estate agent from NG Farah, Rohan Parikh, BOQ Specialist residential banker, and Chula Murray, a recent medical grad who is starting the process of buying her first home. Thanks all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Okay, so it's exciting, Chula, that you're in the process of buying your first home. You've just finished your medical studies at Flinders University, and now I believe you're working as an intern at Flinders Hospital in Adelaide. So I guess I just want to start the ball rolling by asking, what is it that's made you take the plunge to buy rather than rent a property?
Hi Sarah, thanks for having me. For us, we've been in Adelaide now for 4 years, and we've been looking around at different places and sort of, we've had that dream to buy our own place. It's been great renting, but I think we're ready to put down roots now. And I sort of didn't think that it was at all possible until I rang Rohan and said, how do I go about getting a home loan? And he was really helpful and said, this is what you need to do. And we got the ball rolling. So now it's sort of starting to become a bit of a reality.
And as far as not thinking it was possible, because you were still studying at the time, or what was it that you felt?
Definitely. I think whilst you're still studying, I wasn't earning any money. And my partner, whilst he had a job, obviously that's not going to be able to pay for a mortgage for the two of us. But I think for the first few months of internship, most of us still were in student mode. So we were still buying things on sale and not expecting that we've got any money to spend or save, really. But after the first few months, I thought, actually, this is completely doable. And we did a few sums at home, thinking about paying rent versus a mortgage. And we sort of calculated that it would be much of a muchness. So we thought we may as well give it a crack. Yeah,
that's awesome. And Rohan, you obviously played a big part in this, opening the doors to Chula and her partner opening their first home and letting them know it is possible. So do you remember having that conversation, and what was your advice to Chula?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Chula and I probably had a brief chat a couple of years ago when she was still studying, and that's kind of how I first interacted with her. And obviously she got in touch not long ago and expressed the interest. And that initial obviously meeting that we had, it was great to see her journey throughout and see what she's help her throughout the next journey of this new journey of her buying her first place. That initial conversation was great. I mean, it's obviously exciting to see people you've seen who've been studying and then now are kind of looking to take the next plunge in their life. And I think Chula will agree with me. That first conversation that we had was very comfortable, and it was really good to kind of see what her plans are, to get an idea what she's looking to do, and figure out, let's kind of advise her that we can definitely do this for her.
Yeah, and good to know that it's possible to do while you're still studying. You can absolutely start planning, right?
Absolutely. People don't realize that the house buying journey is very daunting, I think. And when you sit down and kind of go through it with someone who has experience, it's great. And Chula will tell you how this journey initially, has been for her. But it's not that hard, and people can start thinking about it when they're studying and kind of get an idea of what they're looking to do and what their plans are.
And would you recommend they start doing that while they're studying?
Absolutely. The idea behind having a first house and, dream of owning one is very inbuilt into all of us. And people, I think it's a great idea to start thinking about it early, because it's a great asset to have, and compared to renting as well. It's good to have your own asset and start building that up as soon as, you can get the chance to do it.
Chula, were you quite nervous about it, or was there anything particularly that worried you about buying your first home?
Oh, yeah, I was completely beside myself with the fear of buying my first home. I think especially now, because house prices are going completely wild and the market is really quick, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I think also somebody said to me back in, I think it was third year of medical school, to really think carefully about your financial choices when you graduate, because this is for most of us, this is the first time that you're earning serious money. You know, we're not talking minimum wage at Macca's anymore. We're talking really, really serious money. And it is something that I sort of didn't really probably pay much attention to in the first few months of internship. And having that conversation with Rohan was really beneficial because he sat down with me and we went through everything over a coffee about what was expected and potentially what I could aim for in terms of a mortgage. And that actually made things a lot easier. I feel like we've got a great relationship now. I can call, and I have done, I've called him and said, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help me? And it's been, yeah, it's just sort of been a really nice organic process.
So the actual market part was probably more what made you nervous. I mean, obviously the financial part was part of it and Rohan was able to calm your nerves there. But you were saying, you know, the market is going crazy at the moment. So Ben, I guess I'd seek your advice as far as calming people's nerves. If they've got their financial stuff calmed down and they've got a wrap on that, what would you suggest for the rate of the market and what's going on in the market, something they can't sort of necessarily control?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think you're right, and Chula and Rohan probably had the right of it. I think if you are heading out and you are looking to buy a property, it's kind of important that you don't put the cart before the horse. So knowing your financial position, knowing what is actually going to be achievable, and most of that starts with what the budget is that you're using, makes it a lot easier to actually narrow down where you might be looking and certainly what you're looking for. And I think that clarity makes it a lot easier for people to make a decision, because we do find sometimes people get carried away or not carried away, but caught up between different styles of properties, certainly different locations, areas. And when you're looking across 3, 4, 5 different suburbs at 2 different styles of property and maybe even in multiple price points, it can be confusing. And that's where I think a lot of people do get caught up, particularly if it's your first time. It is daunting. But if you look at it in a micro sense rather than a macro sense, I think that does actually help in a big way.
Yeah, cool. And Chula, did you reach out to real estate agents, you know, to get a better understanding about the process of buying your first home? Have you had those conversations, or is it more the financial side of things that you're getting a handle over?
Probably more of a financial thing. Like, we've seen a few houses, we've gone to a few open days and had a few just casual chats with real estate agents. Sort of nothing really serious, but that's sort of where we've gotten most of our information from. But really it was more the financial stuff, because I think as a student, when you know that you don't have much of an income, you know that you're not a good candidate for any sort of loan, be it a personal loan, a credit card, or a mortgage. So I still really had it in my head that I was going to go speak to Rohan and say, I'd like to buy a house. And Rohan would laugh at me and be like, are you kidding? But he was the complete opposite. He said, no, you're a perfect candidate. You're an intern. You're only going to keep, your earning potential is just going to keep going up. But he was also really honest with me from the start about what I could expect to get as a loan. So he didn't promise me the earth. He said, based on what I understand your salary to be, this is what we can get for you. And so then that made the process really easy, because then I knew from the market, looking at the houses, that we were sort of interested in what was within our budget and what was completely crazy. So yeah, that was really helpful.
Absolutely. And Rohan, what advice would you give to help them start preparing their finances and working out how much they can spend?
Absolutely. And I've got just a question on that as well. But yeah, look, definitely, I can relate for myself as well, because I've only recently purchased them, and it's daunting to kind of know what you can borrow and know how much you're spending. And there's a lot of questions around the air, and especially with the market being as it is, I think the best thing to do for someone who's looking to get into the market is just kind of have a chat to someone who's been through this journey before. So for example, if you had any colleagues or who've been through a journey. And the second thing would be obviously have a chat to your banker as well, because they go through this, you're buying a house for your first time, but they buy a house every day essentially. So, they know the ins and outs, and they kind of help, they're great to kind of get an idea of what you can do, what you can't do. I actually had a quick question for Ben, because Chula and I, when we first spoke, she said she was going to go into an auction, and I actually want to get your idea, Ben. What would you kind of give an advice? What would you say to look out for would be the main things when you're going for an auction, or versus if you're going for an off-market or private sale, especially with nowadays with a lot of properties coming on as auctions?
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, look, the auction mode of campaign for any sale is usually indicative of a strong market. So when we're seeing that 90% of campaigns are auctions, like we probably are seeing at the moment in Sydney, it's definitely a mode of sale that can return the biggest profits for the owners. So obviously there's that to take into consideration. Certainly most auction guides or buyer's guides that agents are using, generally speaking, they're not going to bid the sale price. It's usually what we would say is your guide is where we would hope the bidding would open up at auction. So if you've got a budget of 1.7 million, say for a house in Sydney, and the auction guide is 1.7 million, it's not going to be impossible, but it is going to make it hard to compete with people with a bigger budget when it comes to auction. So again, I think being realistic about what an eventual sale price might be is a big factor in how far down that path you go, and certainly to allay any disappointment. I do know multiple people that have looked at a lot of properties and conducted their due diligence and spent time and money, and also got emotionally invested. And it can be quite dispiriting if you miss out on multiple occasions. I think, as I said, that's where a bit of market knowledge, certainly a little bit of realism, can come in handy. Look, a lot of that is hard when it comes to agents. I'm not going to lie, because an agent's job is to try and get the best price for the client. And this is where people do get a little bit frustrated and upset, is sometimes agents aren't necessarily giving you direct answers. That's where it comes into it. An agent who's actually going to reach out and work with you and help you because they want to bring you to auction day, I think they can be a little bit of a resource. The hard part is you might look at multiple properties. You might have 10 agents all wanting some of your time and to speak with you. Again, it does get hard to manage that whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, off market, again, there can be quite a few of them in a market like this. Yeah, look, it can be hard to know exactly what is coming to market and transacting off market. Again, unless you're on a database or speaking consistently or weekly with agents. Look, one thing I would caution with a lot of off market properties, the reason why they're testing the water or dipping their toe in the water is because the price they're putting on it to start with is somewhat of an aspirational price. It might not necessarily be where the market sees value. It might be a little bit of a, let's see how we go before we put it on the open market on the website's real estate and domain and whatnot. But if it's only you and 2 or 3 or 4 other people that are looking at it, obviously you're cutting down the competition that are looking at the property. So it can be a good way to get in to buy a property without that anxiety and mania that comes with auctions particularly.
Do you see people being deterred from purchasing a house if it is an auction because of the fear around, the price hike on the day that's
Very much so.
No control?
Because most buyers, even if it is your first time, most people have a fair idea what comes along with an auction. And certainly that emotive side of it is what agents use as part of the auction process. That's how you can get the best price. And the competition of being there, looking at your competition on the day and not wanting to miss out, obviously, on a house that you have become quite invested in. But I guess the other side of it is that it is a very transparent process. So you do get to see the competition. And certainly if you miss out because someone has a bigger budget, then que sera, sera. If you do buy the property, it's because you're 5 or 10K over the next bidder. You know that you've paid market value because there was legitimately somebody else that you saw there who was willing to pay close to that amount. So if you're doing a private treaty, you're obviously listening to an agent, taking their word that there is another buyer, that somebody else has made a higher offer when they're asking you to come up. So there's always that little bit of an unknown quantity to it.
So essentially, really, 50% of one, 50% of the other, people shouldn't necessarily fear.
I wouldn't shut down the fact that you can buy at auction. I wouldn't say it's just not for me. There is a lot of properties that are transacting prior to auction. Some properties that are listed for an auction, they might only be that way to try and obviously generate a little bit of activity, and they might almost not even plan to go to auction. They may just be angling to sell for a good price prior to auction. So there is other ways to do it. I think the only other thing outside of that, and Rohan would probably be able to go into this more, some people, due to restrictions or that have been put on their lending, may not be able to buy under auction conditions. That's a different conversation, obviously, if they can't physically do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of clients I've got right now, obviously we do approvals subject to valuations. And that's one big question I've been getting a lot, which is, how can we have a condition to a valuation when you go to an auction, it has to be kind of unconditional. And it's a factor that, does play a part in approvals, and then does play a part in, clients' emotions as well. Like how can you go for a property and how can you know the price of a property or the value of the property when it's undecided yet and when it's still going to go for auction? There is potential another party that could put an offer down for a lot higher and kind of do a bit of a bidding war. So it does definitely play a part, and it's a conversation that you do have to kind of tread carefully with, and obviously advise clients of all the risks and all the factors and all the aspects around auctions as well.
And Chula, do you sort of feel any nerves around, whether it ends up being an auction or an off market that you end up purchasing?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always in the back of your head. I mean, I've been to plenty of auctions just as a voyeur because it's so much fun to go and watch other people suffer at an auction. But yeah, the thought of doing it myself is terrifying. But yeah, and definitely the rules around buying at auction, because they're different to buying at a regular sale. All of that stuff is completely brand new. So this is all stuff that we're learning ourselves, the rules and stuff about that. But I guess having a chat with Rohan and knowing that if we have pre-approval, that makes the process easier, because okay, well, we've got pre-approval, everything, all our ducks are lined up. We don't have to worry about going to something, not being able to bid or not being able to put in an offer, and then being really disappointed.
And Rohan, how long does that pre-approval last?
That pre-approval lasts, so initial pre-approvals last about 3 months, about 90 days. And I think we had the chat with Chula as well, that if you don't find property within 90 days, it's not the end of the world. As long as nothing's changed and your situation and your circumstances are quite, they're exactly the same, or if anything better, we can, if it goes, a couple of days over the 90 days, we definitely can have a look at, getting it refreshed for you if you do find a property a little bit after. And that's been the case a lot of times recently where, there's a lot of demand for a lot of properties, but the supply isn't there as much. So it does take a bit longer for you to find your property or your dream house that you're wanting to buy.
And to extend that, does that just extend for another 90 days or?
It depends. If you find a house, then we can just extend it for that house, for that purchase. If you do want to extend it for another 90 days, we just need a statutory declaration signed saying that nothing's changed and everything is similar, and that's extended for another 90 days.
So people could start getting prepared, knowing that it's easy enough to extend that approval, sitting there waiting until they find their dream home.
Absolutely. As long as nothing's changed, as long as, if anything, your situation might be better, we can definitely have a look at that.
Chula, was there anything particular that you were sort of just perplexed about this whole process of planning and looking to buy your first home?
Yeah, I guess for us, when we started thinking about it, my partner said to me, why don't you go and talk to the bank? And so then that cleared up a lot of things. But things like, I'd completely forgotten that you had to pay stamp duty and government taxes, and that you need to get the house valued. And I had to Google what a conveyancer was, because I was like, I don't know what a conveyancer is. So all of that sort of stuff, I think, because because it's such a huge sum of money. So you just think it's all part of it, right? It's all part of it. But, on top of your purchase price, you do have to pay government taxes. You do have to pay stamp duty. You do need to get the house valued. So all of that stuff, I'm not confused about it now, but that's all stuff that I think people should know when they're getting into it, that it's not just the purchase price that you're paying. There's extras on top of it. So you need to make sure that you've got the capacity. So like if you've got a mortgage for, say, $1 million, you need to make sure you've got extra to pay for all the other bits and pieces on top of.
Yeah, and I guess, Rohan, you would run them, clients through that pretty clearly. I think for me, there's confusion over whether you need a 20% deposit. Do you need a 10% deposit? Oh, do you actually even need a deposit? So how does that kind of play out, Rohan?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the main things I go through with clients in their first meeting, when I first initially have a chat to them and I first initially meet them in person. A lot of students don't actually know, like Tudor said, they're not actually aware of, what's involved in that whole buying process and what, who a conveyancer is or how much deposit they can put in. And that's where kind of the initial chat really helps, where you kind of get an idea of, first of all, we kind of go and see how much we can lend you. So how much your income allows you to kind of service. Second thing is, if you are servicing this amount of money, if you are able to lend you this amount of money, how much have you got in terms of savings to put towards a deposit? The great thing about us as BOQ specialists is we can do, an 80% or 90% or even 100% loan for young doctors and dentists who are wanting to get into their first property. And that's not offered by many people. And that's one thing that we do great. And that's one thing I kind of obviously make sure that I educate the clients on and show them all aspects of, look, if you borrowed 20%, sorry, if you put in a 20% deposit, this is what your scenario looks like. If you put in a 10% deposit, this is what the scenario looks like. And if you want to do more, this is how that works. This is how this product works, and this is how this scenario looks like. So kind of that educating part is a big important step for young students who, it's just young doctors and dentists who are just graduated and kind of looking to get their first property and want to get an idea of what to put in, how much to save, and how it all works out. So for young doctors and dentists who've just finished their studies, obviously they haven't got a substantial, sometimes they might not have a substantial amount of savings. They might not have enough to put for a 20% deposit. They might not even have enough to put for a 10% deposit as they've worked all these 5-6 years studying and paying for their lifestyle. It's tough to save up for, if you're buying a house for, let's say, $500,000, 10% deposit, $50,000, and your stamp duty and government costs as well could be around 20, 25, 26, depending on where you are in the country. So saving up approximately $75,000 for a first house straight out of university is a tough thing to do. And the good thing about us is obviously with BOQ Specialist, the good thing about us, we have a product which allows clients to purchase for a property, and we actually fund 100% off the financing for it. So they might not even need to have a deposit saved to get into their first place. And a little bit on how that kind of works is, 90% of the loan we fund as a traditional 30-year loan term. The extra 10%, which normally, clients are required to have as a deposit, we fund as a way, in a product which is called a plus loan. So for example, for a 10% loan, so for a 100% loan, the 10% part we fund over 8 years and has a higher interest rate. And most students, always when they come to me, they kind of get worried about, oh, look, it's got a higher interest rate. How am I going to afford the repayments? How am I going to be able to do this? But when I sit down with them and go through the maths with them, they actually, it's not actually as bad as they think it is. It's actually quite manageable. And the thing that I explained to Chula as well is that with your income increasing it's only going to increase from here on now. So most doctors and dentists we find end up paying off that plus loan, the extra 10%. It's over an 8-year term, but they end up paying it off in about 3 to 5 years time, which, in retrospective, if you were to buy a property with a 10% deposit would take you a substantial amount of time to save that 10% deposit. Whereas this way, it gets you into your first house quite quickly without even having to worry about saving up that deposit.
Yeah, and Ben, would you find a lot of people fall in love with a house and realise they actually don't have enough to follow through with the sale? Or are most people fairly well prepared?
I wouldn't say that happens a lot. It certainly does happen. I think probably going back to Chula and Rohan's points, I think having those people in place, whether you're only intending to buy one property or if you want to have a portfolio of 50, I think having good people that you can rely on is a huge part of it. So certainly your lender is a big one, conveyancer or solicitor. The one thing that I do find, especially in a hot market, is people tend to get frustrated because they feel they get left behind in some senses. They come and look at a property, they ask for the contract of sale, but they don't necessarily do anything, or they don't understand what to do, the next steps. And that's where people get caught out. Like a really good conveyancer particularly can have a look at the contract, can maybe go through the building report or strata report, and literally could turn you around in about 24 hours and have you ready to buy a property. If you prevaricate or you're slow or they can't turn it around in that kind of a time frame, you do open the door for somebody else to come in and make an offer. And look, even with agents, even for an auction campaign, you might think you have 3 weeks until auction day, and the agent may tell you that it's definitely going to auction and there's no way that it'll sell prior, but things change, people make offers, and the owner's instructions are what we work to. If you're not ready, or you were thinking, I just need to be ready by the 4th Friday, you could be disappointed if things start moving, because they will move very quickly.
So then what would your top tip on buying your first home be?
Probably that. Just be when you know, or when you feel that it's the right property, just be very, very ready to move. Make that decision. It doesn't have to be a snap decision per se, but when you make that decision, you have the people in place that can help you out. So a solicitor who's ready to go and can review all those documents and conduct a due diligence, a good broker or banker who can obviously look at the specific property that you're aiming to buy, because that's a very big thing as well. All well and good to have your pre-approval until they know which property you're looking at and the pricing. That obviously makes a huge difference. So you need those people on your side who can put you in a position to then make an offer, to then formalize an offer and exchange on contracts.
Just going off what Ben said, top tip would definitely be, don't be scared to take the jump. Don't be scared to kind of have a chat. Most people don't realize, that they're ready without having a chat. And that's what, we're here for. We're here, like I said before, you guys are buying your first house, but we help you guys buy a house every day. And we're here to help, and we're here to go through things with you. We're here to sit down with you. We're happy to grab a coffee and then run through everything with you to make sure that you're comfortable. And trust me, it's just as exciting for us helping clients out to buy their houses. It is for them as well.
And Chula, while you've got the ears of Ben and Rohan here, have you got any burning questions or anything else you would like to ask?
Probably my only question for Ben would be, agents, as you said, work on behalf of the client. Do you think that there's any benefit in sort of getting an agent on hand when you're in the position that I'm in of like trying to buy a property?
I definitely do. I guess depending on where you're looking and who the agents are, the trick might be finding that agent. I mean, in my own specific circumstance, I'm probably 5 years, a little bit over 5 years into sales now. And for the first 4+ years, I guess, a lot of my time was spent dealing with buyers. That's as an agent that doesn't have much profile and isn't really out there selling a lot under their own esteem. That's whom we work with. But, today's buyers are tomorrow's sellers. So there's always something. It's a long game. But those are the kind of people that will actually invest time in you and will speak to you about properties, will give you advice as well, not just on what you're looking at with them, but other properties that are in the market or things that you're looking at. So they can give you, in that respect, they can give you an unbiased opinion, which I guess is worth its weight. It certainly comes down to the individual and how well they do it, because some agents, and again, unfortunately, in a very strong market, some agents don't need buyers as much, I guess, is one way of putting it, because they sort of understand that buyers want the property and the property will sell no matter whether they offer a good service proposition to buyers. And it is unfortunate. It is something that we try and avoid, but in trying to put together a deal and get the best result for the owner, sometimes people do get left behind, and it certainly can be buyers in that respect.
Ben, a couple of questions that I get from young students, or young doctors and dentists and vets who are coming to buy their or get into their property market. They always, with everything going around, with the government stimulus packages, with the first homeowners grants, with the builders grants that was available as well. They always come and ask us whether it's better to build, whether to buy land and build, or whether it's to get into just buy a property that's outstanding already. Do you get many questions like that? What would your perspective be on whether you should build or buy at this, especially with the market that it is right now?
The first thing I would say is, if the government's going to give you free money, I'd say take it. That's one initial thought. Look, where I do most of my selling, not so much the building side of it, because obviously the land values are beyond what the government will offer on. And the build cost can be as well. The first home buyer stimulus package, certainly, it's possibly, for pure numbers, it's probably the most active part of the market, purely because that reason. You only get one chance at the first crack. Anybody looking in New South Wales, let's say anybody looking between 650,000 and 800,000 as a purchase price, you do get that stamp duty exemption, and it's pro rata. What stamp duty you will pay between 650 and 800,000. So a lot of people looking to take advantage of that with strata apartments mainly. And also, if you're looking at a brand new build, anything up to 900,000 will also be exempt. So I do have quite a few people looking at that. For that reason, because a lot of buyers are looking at things that are brand new, that has sort of led to a few of the strata apartment markets slowing down a little bit. So we certainly haven't seen rapid growth in the prices of those properties. Not like you have in the Torrens title, like the house market. So it is actually it can be really good buying at the moment. And again, that's a rather large demographic that we are seeing, may not have been thinking of buying previously, but are now really starting to get active.
Yeah, awesome. And Shula, just from your perspective as well, did you kind of have any doubts or any sort of hesitation between buying or maybe building? Did you consider maybe possibly looking at something to build?
Oh, I don't think I've got the brain capacity to think about building a house. No, I think we've always wanted to just buy. I mean, eventually it'd be great to build a house, in the country, live the country dream. But no, at the moment, I think we're just happy to buy a ready-made house that's. Yeah, and I think I'm in South Australia, and I think that it's different state to state, so it would probably be a really good idea for people just to have an understanding of what's happening in their specific state.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you need a trusty banker and a trusty real estate agent by your side in order to go through this process. But it does sound as though it's doable to even start thinking about purchasing your first home while you're studying. So I want to thank you all for being part of this discussion. It's nice to know that students who are working incredibly hard to specialise in their field of excellence, medical, dental, vet, can rely on those who also specialise in their field of excellence, be it finance or real estate. So a huge thank you to all of you for your time. Chula, good luck finding the house of your dreams. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Ben, thank you for your time, and yours also, Rohan.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure.
For more information on finance and banking solutions for students and graduates, please call 1300 131141 or visit boqspecialist.com.au/students. This podcast is for general information purposes only and not intended as financial or professional advice. It has been prepared without reference to the circumstances of any particular person or business and should not be relied on as such. You should seek your own independent financial, legal and taxation advice before making any decisions. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers alone and do not represent the views or opinions of BOQ Specialist.